A very warm welcome to the World of Lord Russell podcast talk show. And today's show is Swing on the Wing, which captures the life of an English former professional sportsman who played both codes of rugby, football in the known names of Rugby Union, Rugby League, and also in his father's footsteps, the former England cricketer Ian Botham, by playing first-class cricket for Hampshire County Cricket Club. Yes, folks, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome on the show Liam Botham. Welcome to the show, Liam.
Welcome. Thank you so much for having me on, Lord Russell. It's been great times. You've helped us in a couple of things since we met on LinkedIn, and it's a pleasure to be on here.
Absolutely welcome. The pleasure's all mine. It really is, and the audience, of course, when they get to listen to this. What I'd always do is I always like to start from the beginning. So, Liam, you were born in Doncaster here in the UK. So, what do you remember most about your childhood, particularly having a famous father in Ian Botham, a legend of English cricket?
Well, we were. Well, everybody forgets when Dad started his career in Taunton and when he met Mum. Our base, when he got married, and pretty much all the time leading up to that, would be the family home base was always up in Yorkshire. So we started in a little place called Epworth, and that's where our first family home was. And then Dad, during the cricket season, would be down. When he was at Somerset, he was down in Taunton, and then when he was at Worcester, he was at Worcester. And the family were always based around, because my gran and Gramps, Mum's mum and Dad were very helpful. Gramps was like a second father to me, because Dad wasn't really around much, because the touring was a slightly different to what it is now. What do I remember? Where do you start? I mean, as a kid, it was unbelievable. Dad, traveled a lot, obviously, so I was with the family a lot. But when we did go away, it was always fun, and I'd always go and spend sort of a month, during the summer with Dad and
Yes.
Andy, who was Dad's sort of right hand helper driver, Andy Withers. So we had some unbelievable times. Obviously Dad would be fishing, he would be doing sort of outdoors. The people that would come and visit, we had Eric Clapton lived with us for a while. We go and Elton, in these heydays when it was, if you think back to those times, it was crazy, it was bonkers. And I suppose the other thing was the press. Up to the age of 10, 11, 12, I could pour a mean gin and tonic, because my poor mum we pretty much get a phone call on the Saturday saying, oh well, this is the next story that's coming out, and we'd just brace ourselves as a family of what's coming, because obviously that was when there was the War of the Sun News of the World, and it was about selling papers. And unfortunately, as a lot happens now, bad news normally sells better than good news, which is a real shame, because it's one of my grudges that it doesn't seem people have lost the way to support and praise people now. It seems to be easier to knock people and put them down than it is to praise anymore, which is a shame. But going back to the kids, look, I think I was probably the first and last to ever have done what I could have done with the dressing rooms, with the people, with the way that cricket had just, with Dad, how Dad changed cricket, not only putting bums on seats and everything, and sort of, changing the sort of way that the committees and everything and how the structure was. I probably got away with a bit of murder in respect of what I could do, living with the dressing rooms and with that people. And I suppose I had to grow up very quickly. But, Dad also had to keep a little bit of discipline when I came. So he would always never really spoil me too much. That was my grandfather who did that, TG. But it was a fantastic, everybody asked me, and it was surreal to think of what it was. And you couldn't do it now because of social media and all this sort of stuff. And, I can remember 86, 87 when just after a famous West Indian tour where Dad supposedly broke the bed with Miss Universe or whoever it was, as we all know. And Mum put her foot down and said, right, we're all coming as a family on the next tour, which was the 86, 87 tour. And it was fascinating, really, because obviously with that, the press didn't have any real stories to say. And then I can remember being pulled up Dad rang the nanny and said, "Can you send Liam up to the room?" So I came up, and Dad sort of said, "Have you got a gun or something?" And I said, "Dad, I'm 9 years old, or and he says, "Okay, so you haven't been going up and down the lift with an air rifle shooting people?" I said, "Dad, I don't have an air rifle." So that was the extent of the press, actually. So Dad was so upset with this, and basically said, "Right, there was supposed to be an England team missing room, England team meeting with the wives, and they were supposed to have a bit of a surah, get everybody together." Anyway, Elton was in the hotel room and got wind of this, and basically rang down and said, "Right, Beef, you're going off. You got to go and do this. I'm babysitting Liam." So on the back of that, Elton John babysat me for the night. Ordered everything on the room menu, and it was just surreal. That's how it was. As I said, Eric came to live with us. So in that side, what was it like? Yeah, it was fantastic. And I wouldn't change it for the world, Lord Russell.
No, well, you can't, can you? Because
No.
it's history. And it's interesting about the media, isn't it? Because they're still the same now. They just write a complete load of nonsense, don't they? And anybody that believes what's written in the press or the media needs to take a look at themselves, because these stories they just manifest from nothing, don't they? It's all designed to just create whatever profit
Yeah.
they can for people. It's just
Well, they seem they
ridiculous.
can print. They seem they can print what they want, and then you've got to defend
Mm,
yourself after. But the damage is done, and I don't think
it
they
is.
realise actually the damage that it does to people. And I suppose the other
Yeah.
thing is everybody goes, "Why did you change from cricket to, from cricket to rugby?" As well, you name me one person. We're not talking, and this
Mm,
isn't being arrogant. This is being rude to any of the other fantastic good cricketers. But Dad was a different level to anybody. He was the George Best of
yes,
cricket.
I
He
agree.
was, so some other sons have done well and come through and done very, very well. But there isn't in any sport, in any real, business, unless it's been given to them, it's
Yes.
always very hard for those kids. And I don't think people appreciate the pressures and the comparisons that are made of you.
Mm,
And I suppose that is also towards the end of my childhood that I started to really understand that. I can always remember, sorry, I'm jumping off a little bit, was, at the end of my career, towards the end of my career, I was out in a nightclub in London called Black's, and I bumped into Callum Best. And myself and Callum, and you imagine it was nightclub, there was lots going on, and
yes.
we just got chatting, and it was so interesting to get his side of the story. And there's so many comparisons of, and I
Mm,
don't think people really, really understand that, of what the sons actually get pressurized and get compared to, because I suppose a little bit like what the Beckhams are, but I
yeah.
would
Good
say that
point.
the Beckhams is slightly different because that's a business, isn't it? The whole
It
Beckham
is.
brand is a business, and the
Yeah.
kids are sort of thing. But I suppose you live by the sword, die by the sword there with that sort of environment. But
Exactly.
with us and those sort of later times of the people, you're on a hiding for nothing. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah. No, I quite agree. Quite agree completely. In fact, I mean, you initially followed in your father's footsteps, of course, playing first class county cricket for Hampshire. Actually, it's a club I supported as a youngster as well, Hampshire, funnily enough. You played 3 matches in the 1996 season, and in doing so, you took the wicket of former England captain Mike Gattin on your county championship debut. I mean, you couldn't get better than that, could you? So please tell us more about your debut match for Hampshire, Liam, plus, of
Yeah.
course, the huge scalp of Mike Gattin. Amazing.
Yeah, look, I mean, I signed at 15, probably a little bit too young, but with the cricket, I certainly wanted to go my own route. So I didn't want to go anywhere that Dad had played.
Mm,
I wasn't sure where I was going. And then Hampshire, Dad, we're at Durham, and Dad hosted Hampshire. And the boys, and there was a lot of his mates, Lubo, Judgy, all those guys. And they came for a barbecue, and they sort of asked me where I was going, and I got chatting. They said, "Why don't you come
mm,
down and see us?" And that was it. I went down there, had a great time. And then the debut came. It was quite interesting. It was Middlesex, and it was at Portsmouth. Uh, John Stevenson was the captain. He was sort of injured, so I actually went down, and then he said he was going to play. So then I got sent back to Southampton. By the time I got to Southampton, he was injured again. So I then had to go back down to Portsmouth, and then that was it. And Judgy Robin Smith, God bless him, who's no longer with us, which is a great loss. Judgy was captain, and he got me on pretty early. And my first ever first class cricket was it was a leg side half volley, which was hit sweetly off his toes, but went straight to Keachy at square leg.
Nice.
And it went, and it was quite interesting. I got fifer. It was great. And then it was basically the circus. I mean, and get Gat out. I don't think Dad ever got Gat out, so it was quite an interesting one. And and after the game, suddenly the game was going on, and there were vans turning up, and there was this, and there was going on. I mean, it was an hour and a half I was doing interviews. I was just 18-year-old kid. I can't remember, was I 17, 18, whatever it was. And it was a circus. And I think it was then, I definitely knew, and I could feel up to that 15-year-old, it didn't really bother me. I was very, very good. No, not being, arrogant. I was one of the best around, with Freddie and all those people who were players. And I think it was then when I realized it doesn't matter where I went or who I played against, whether it be second team or whatever, I was always compared to certain things that Dad had done or whatever it was. And I suppose it hit home, because after that debut, I would always, again, going back to something in a childhood, when I was 12 and there was an under 13 North of England tournament, and I overheard some parents talking, saying, "Oh, he's only in because of who he is." And from that point on, I have, and it's the reason I've got 3 new hips, I would always be first. One had that excuse of saying that he's only there because of his, dad or whatever it is. But going back to that, after the debut, I got in early on the day after. We bowled Middlesex out, and then I got a few runs as well. But after the game, myself and Mike Gattin, there was a glass of champagne with us. I mean, it was bonkers. An hour and a half of doing interviews, this, that, and the other. And then I got into the dressing room, and Terry came up. He said, "My God, Liam, have you seen the papers?" And I hadn't, because obviously I got up, got into the dressing, because obviously I lived in Southampton, so drove down to Portsmouth, although it was a home game. And it literally was front, middle, and back. And it was everything. This is going to be this and that, son of that, this and everything. And I knew that was something in the back of my mind, that I wasn't enjoying the cricket that much anymore, because I just thought, when am I ever going to be able to do my own thing? And I think it was then that hit me. And I knew I could never, ever really go down this route unless I was going to be one of the best. And I think that really played on my mind. Maybe should have had a sports psychologist, but Dad being, that may have helped me. But I didn't, and they weren't really around in those days. And although I had support from Judgy and all those sort of people, it wasn't. And so I played a couple more games, came towards the end of the season, and obviously during that time I'd always played rugby. I played schoolboys rugby all the way through, and everything else, and rugby just become professional. And I suppose it was the first time I wasn't looking forward to going back to cricket, and that's when I knew that was it. That would be. So I rang, and pretty much that's how it all happened. But
no, fair enough. We'll come on to the rugby shortly.
Yeah.
But putting things in perspective, the sort of player you were at cricket. I mean, you were a medium-fast right-arm bowler as well as a right-handed batsman.
Yeah.
So apart from taking the wicket of Mike Gattin, of course, on your debut, what other highlights do you remember playing cricket at Hampshire County Cricket Club? It was a bit of a party atmosphere, wasn't there? But at that time in cricket, and what do you remember mostly? Even outside of the actual cricket games themselves.
Well, we were very privileged, because Hampshire had some amazing overseas and also coaches. Malcolm Marshall,
Oh, Malcolm
You know,
Marshall, what
I
a
mean, I
player.
think he's one of the gifted guys. I mean, he used to come off 2 or 3 run-ups, and
Mm.
Mako was great. He would spend some time with me because, again, I'd want to train. But he was a fantastic
Oh,
coach,
definitely.
fantastic player, and even when he was coaching, he could come off 2 or 3 yards with a speed of it, and do an
Yeah.
outswinger, in swinger, do whatever he wanted. I mean, he was a magician, and we had some, obviously David Gower, you know,
Yep.
um, you know. Judgy. Yeah, we had an unbelievable team. There was a great setup. I mean, again,
Yes.
probably a little bit too young put into it. I live with, but fantastic memories. When I went down there, signed. We went into a house with four other lads, and it was great times. I enjoyed it. I, you know, I was batting, probably more of a batting all rounder.
Yes.
And all I remember is the great people that were around, the support I had. I loved playing there,
Mm.
and I love the competitive. I've always been competitive, no matter what it was.
Yeah.
So I suppose a lot of thrills, a lot of great times. You make great
Absolutely.
mates throughout your whole sporting career. We got an old group chat that I've got back into, and it's great chatting to. And the memories, I suppose, then flood back of the
Mm.
times we had, and there'll be something about a tour or a trip we had to Blackpool or wherever it was, and it would be those memories were brought back. And I think you know
Definitely.
and cricket is, you spend a lot of time away because if it's a
Mm.
3 or 4 day game, you're going down the night before, then so you do become and you rely on it's very much team orientated.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely, and it goes on for the whole of the spring and the summer and the early autumn, doesn't it? Let's be honest, and
Yeah,
it's a great game, and as I say, I am a Hampshire supporter, and I
yeah,
remember the days, of course, earlier towards you when we had Gordon Greenwich there as well.
yeah. GG.
Fantastic times. Oh, what an amazing character! Great
Yeah.
club. I
Oh,
mean, as you said though,
absolutely.
yeah. I mean, as you said, you had issues with cricket for various reasons. Obviously, following your dad's footsteps was probably the main reason, I guess. People's expectations, the press. So you left cricket, I think, in 1997 after one senior season, and signed for Rugby Union Club West Hartlepool, where you played as a wing or fullback. So please tell us about your switch from cricket to rugby union, and of course your time at West Hartlepool.
Yeah, well,
What a
during
fresh
the off
start there.
season, I mean, I've always played rugby at school
Mm.
and club. Ever since I was 9 years old, when I went down to my grandfather was a big rugby person.
Yes.
So love the sport. All the schools I went to, apart from the first school, which was a comprehensive school in
Mm.
Epworth, basically we moved. Wanted to go up north, and I think mum and dad also wanted to sort of give me a bit of protection around a private school
Yes.
because I can always remember at the comprehensive, getting lifted up and put on the toilets because there were some boys that thought they could do that. But anyway, that's another story.
Yes,
But
it is.
going to the rugby, I touched on it. It was after I'd always played rugby to keep fit. I loved it. Never thought of it because all I could think about was cricket. Whenever the rugby
Mm.
season it was, I was counting the days down to when we were going to go in and play the cricket. But it was weird. It was very, very strange in respect of I signed at 15, so I was at Hampshire for 3, 4 years. So, playing the second team, playing with the first team in the last year, and
Mm.
I was always excited to going back. But this time, after that debut, and then the next couple of games, I had not a sinking feeling, but I was more thing about actually the rugby. I'm looking forward to going back to the rugby, and rugby
Mm.
at that stage had just turned professional.
Yes.
So, and I just got into the first team over. I was only 18, and I just about to get into the first team at West Hartlepool before I went back to the cricket. So it was there and thereabouts. Um, I was 18, yeah,
Mm.
and I got back and basically got into the first team pretty quickly. And as soon as I did, they sort of said, "Look, we want, if it's professional, would you think about, signing as a pro?" I jumped at it, and I
Of
think
course you did.
I was hoping it was going to happen, and it did. Um, and I spoke to Dad, and he said, "Look, son, I get it. I think he was probably the right. He was relieved as well, And I can always remember ringing Tim Tremlett up, who was the
Mm,
coach at Hampshire, and before he said it, he said, Liam, I get it, I understand. I said, look, troops, I said, look, the great thing is, if I don't make it or don't go down the route, then I've always got cricket to come back at. And he said, yeah, look, keep in touch. If anything happens, just give us a shout. And they were great about it. I had just signed a new contract with Hampshire for
mm,
another, I think it was 2 or 3 years. But they got it. And I think they'd seen it in me as well. I think troops had definitely seen. I think the players around, I went into my
mm,
shell a little bit. I wasn't enjoying it a bit. I got the yips, probably got the yips a little bit with the bowling as well. So it was just refreshing, and I loved it. And I can remember scoring my first try, um,
mm.
and the headlines the next day was Liam Botham, and there was
Mm.
obviously the son of, but there was no comparison. Dad had played, I think, 2 games of rugby in his whole life, or 1 game and got sent off. He was a football and cricket man, so
Yes, he was.
it was. It knew and it hit me there and then straight away that this was the right decision, and
Yep.
um, and then very quickly, West Hartlepool was great, very small, very traditional club. They weren't like a lot of clubs weren't ready for the professional era. It wasn't sustainable. I don't think it's particularly sustainable even now, if we're being
Mm.
brutally honest. They've got to look at these things. But anyway, and the change of people came in. But the fans were so loyal, fantastic. Loved my time at West Hartlepool. And then, like all things, Mike Brewer came along, who was obviously, New Zealander, World Cup, although he was sick, and I think he still begrudges. And I felt Mike came in, and he wanted to be the be all and end all at West Hartlepool, and didn't like the fact that and that somebody else grabbed headlines, and I did, because that just came with
Yeah.
the Botham name, I'm afraid.
Yes.
And he didn't particularly see eye to eye with me. Didn't I think he, I don't know what it was. It was very weird. But anyway, um, I sort of signed, and I wasn't enjoying it, and I basically then said, okay. The great thing was that Dad was great friends with the Thomas family, who were Cardiff through and through. Obviously,
Yes.
Peter no longer with us, sadly. The money and the influence that he had over Cardiff, and they said, "Yeah, sure. Look, come. We can see that you got some talent, Liam. Come down for a trial." I went down for a trial, and that was it. That was in my whole sporting career. I would go those.
Mm.
I had 4 years at Cardiff, but the real 3 years where I suddenly accelerated, and got into the England team for the 2000. Those 3 years were some of the best times, highlights, fun times in all of my sporting career.
Yeah, I sort of read that you had 3 seasons at Cardiff, but you say 4, so that's fine. And
Yeah.
you played 29 games in total, amassing 120 points for Cardiff. I mean, that's not bad total, is it? In those 3 years, that's
Yeah,
quite
well,
a
it's actually more than that, because
resounding. Oh, it was.
we had the rebel season. So I
Yes.
mean, I played a lot more than that, and it's interesting because obviously my son Jimbo's at Cardiff.
Mm.
Jimbo was born when I was playing for Cardiff. That's the reason he's Welsh. But I don't know what my actual stats were. I broke the try scoring record there.
Yep.
I don't know. That was during the when the Rebel Cardiff went Rebel. I don't know if you remember that, but they went against,
No, I
and we played.
don't. But
Yeah, we played
yeah,
against all the England.
interesting.
So getting, I think it was Cardiff's way of trying to say, look, WRU, get yourself into
Yeah.
gear, get yourself sorted. And we went Rebel. And it was brilliant. We had full capacity crowds every time we played. We basically
Brilliant.
played against all the English clubs.
Yeah.
And yeah, I broke the try scoring record. I think I don't know. It was crazy. I think I was 90% chance of scoring. It was great. I had Lee Davis and Gareth Thomas inside of me. Unbelievable. And we had Rob Howley, Jenkins, Lee
Mm.
Jarvis.
Good side.
Oh, I mean, if you that was, and Gareth and Lee for me were. I mean, how they didn't play regularly for Wales again. You got um, all the politics within sport, and people don't realise the politics that go on in sport. But
Mm.
for me,
World
those two
politics.
were the understanding that those two had, and the power and the pace. It was and I was on a ride. It was
Yeah, of
fantastic.
course.
Having that, and they passed the ball as well. So yeah, it was great, and the Welsh is so passionate. Really,
Definitely.
really passionate. They were so supportive. Obviously the family, we were made, like home. And then Graham Henry obviously came in and sort of wanted me to play for Wales under the residency. Clive stepped in. So yeah, but Cardiff
Yeah.
was Cardiff was fantastic. It really was. Great memories. All
It's
sorts.
good to
And
hear.
yeah,
And then, of course, your big move in rugby union came in 2000 when
yeah.
you moved to Newcastle Falcons, a big side, aren't they, Newcastle Falcons? I mean, how did this move come about? That's a really big move.
Yeah, so what happened was I played England A and was player of the tournament in the England A that I got given. Andy Harriman was
Yes.
coach. I got given I played really well, and I was on a crest. I was, um, playing great rugby, very confident, and scoring tries. I was scoring tries, and as soon as I got into England A's, I was scoring tries. I played England 21s under Clive. So I'd always been there or thereabouts, and then suddenly got into England A side and played great there. And then I got picked for the 2000 tour to South Africa, and Clive base. I'd signed a new just about to sign a new deal with Cardiff, and Clive said, "Look, Liam, we need the players playing in the Premiership back in the
Yeah.
UK." And I look back on it, and there's two mistakes I made, and this is no detriment to Newcastle. The two mistakes I made was I should have been strong enough to say to Clive. I said, "Well, Clive, look, you've picked me on tour. I'm comfortable. I'm at home at Cardiff. Why do you want me to change?" Because I was in a fantastic team as well,
Yes.
and well, it was fantastic. And the other one is I had a choice of quite a couple of clubs, but Zinzan was the coach at Harlequins at that stage, and Zinzan came and he wanted to move me into centre. He said he saw me as an inside centre, which I would have agreed. I didn't have I had good pace, but I didn't have out and out pace. And then what
Mm.
I realized is, which I know now, is my hips came in. I've had both 3 full hip replacements, but those
Mm.
hips, no one thought about it back at that time. But my hips had started, and I lost about a yard of pace, and it happened just after I got back from the England tour,
Mm.
and I could feel it. But anyway, going back to it, um, I should have, if I was going back to the Premiership, I should have gone to Harlequins and played centre. But Newcastle came in. Blackie, who was the fitness coach at Wales, really good guy. Obviously, going back towards home, where home was, and my wife as well,
Mm.
from up there. I suppose, look, there were some great people there. Some really was. The only issue was pretty much Rob Andrew was there as well, and we didn't have the go, but it was, look, for the first year was good, and then it wasn't. It just wasn't great times.
Yeah, because while you were at Newcastle Falcons, I mean, you mentioned Rob Andrew there. I mean, he was a great player, Rob Andrew, wasn't he? But whilst you were at Newcastle Falcons, the club did win the 2001 Tetley Bitter Cup in the final, of
Yeah.
which you were a replacement, I understand too. And that's a huge moment in your rugby union career as well, isn't it, Liam?
Yeah, it was.
Winning
Look,
the
don't get me wrong. I had a great time. There was some
yeah.
unbelievable young talent came through.
Oh yes.
And spending time with Johnny and some of the older boys. Gary Armstrong. God bless him, Doddy,
Mm,
Inga. I mean, the team was unbelievable, and
yes.
it was, and there was some fantastic players like Hugh Vivian, Andrew Mower, Jamie Noon,
Mm,
Stevenson. I mean, it was a real crop of youngsters that to be fair, the thing, and I think a lot of credit there has to also go to Steve Bates, who was the coach then, of bringing those guys through.
mm,
Um, and it was great times, and they did and that team deserved that recognition of winning the Tetley, and Dave Walder was a great player as well. So
yeah.
it was, and don't get me wrong, I just then I enjoyed it. It was, I still believe it's one of the toughest, competitions out there. I still believe it is. I
Mm,
think probably the French may be just up there now, because of, it's a religion in France and there's a lot more
it
money.
is.
Um, but yeah, look, the fans were fantastic. Very loyal. You get that, and it's a great place, and up in the north.
Absolutely. And of course, Newcastle Falcons also reached the final of the European Shield. I mean, that's a great experience, isn't it? So tell us more about that final, the European Shield final, Liam.
Um, the Shield final.
Yes.
Do you know what? I can't even remember it.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, right. Okay. That was in the same year as the Tetley
I
Bitter
might
Cup,
not have been. I went
2021.
through an injury. The Tetley Bitter was
Oh,
fun.
okay.
The Tetley Bitter was fantastic because the guys. It was a
Yes.
really great game. Obviously at Twickenham, I played there.
Mm.
And they were any sort of final, especially in that, and that was the old cup, which was meant a lot. They don't really
Yes.
have that cup anymore now, which is a shame. I think rugby need that because I think you've got to. I can remember. I think in that run up or the cup we had, we went down to one of the lesser real, either the second or division, and it was a really rainy day, and we only won by the skin of our teeth. And I remember it. And do you know what? Dave Thompson, who was the coach at that, who was the owner of that time, actually turned around and said, "You know what? Because you'd share the money for the day." And Dave
Mm.
said, "You know what? You guys gave us the biggest show you deserve," and he gave them all the match fund fees, which I thought was
Interesting.
fantastic from him. And I think you lose that a bit. And I think for those lesser clubs, and also spreading the game,
Yes.
to play there, a bit like the FA Cup does. I think, that is, and then that was the pinnacle, one of the pinnacle. Okay, you always love to win the Premiership and the league,
Of
but the
course.
Tetley Bitter Cup was massive. And I can remember it, and it was fantastic. And fair play to the team at that stage. It was,
Yeah.
they deserved that. People like Doddy and great, and there were fond memories, and obviously celebrated really well afterwards.
Absolutely. And then, moving on slightly to your international experience, because I know you mentioned it briefly earlier on. I
Yeah.
mean, from an international perspective, you did make your debut for England under 21 team in 1997 against France, of all teams. Incredible. And how did that debut go for you, Liam?
Yeah, I mean, the 21s was fantastic,
Yeah.
because it was a stepping stone. I'd taken that plunge of leaving the cricket, and within
Mm.
sort of within 2.5 years, I was in the under 21s,
Yes.
and I played there, and then I got selected to go on the Sansa tournament, so which was fantastic in South Africa. It was a
Yeah,
real eye opener.
1998, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was a real
Yeah.
eye opener. And I can just remember, the debut was fantastic. I think it was at Welford Road, was it? The debut was
I
it at
think it
Welford
was
Road?
actually, yes. I think it
Yeah.
was.
So yeah, Clive. I think Clive was our coach.
Mm.
So yeah, so Welford Road, packed Welford Road Stadium. I think I also came on. I was a substitute. I came on for Paul Sampson, um, and I think we won that, or just lost. It was a close game, and I loved it. And I thought, this is part of my development.
Yes.
And I was getting you've got to get your foot on that escalator to go forward. And then after that, I then got into the Sansa Straits, in South Africa, which was great, very tough. I mean, I can remember playing the New Zealand boys, and they gave us the almighty. But I played quite well on that tour. I
Yeah,
actually
brilliant.
in the press, they were just saying that one of the few people who came out in colours was myself. So again,
Mm.
that was again another stepping stone for me, realizing that I was making my own way. There was very little of the son of all this sort of stuff, and that was sort of in my first year at Cardiff. Then I got into the England A after that very quickly. So it was a very quick escalation. And I suppose if
Yes.
you look at it, but I was on the 2000 tour. So within sort of 4 years of turning professional, of not, from being a schoolboy, I was on the full England tour. So, I
Absolutely.
think, a lot of credit, you sometimes have to look back at that and realize how quickly that happened and escalated.
Absolutely, which it often does when good players come along, which like yourself. And of course, when you were at the Sansa tournament in South Africa in 1998, this is where the newspaper, the independent newspaper, I hasten to add, headlined, and I quote, Botham swing on the wing. Of course, the
Yeah.
title of the show, of course. I mean, this is a huge achievement too, isn't it? And you must have many memories as an England under 21 international. But for the newspapers to actually, be positive about you in that way is something else. That's great news, isn't it? It's a lovely
Yeah, it
quote.
was. It was, and I did. I moved from between the centre and the wing a little bit there.
Yes.
It was, the weather was pretty awful as well. There was a lot of rain, and so
Mm,
but it was, it was. I suppose when you've always got a little bit of doubt because I'd always thought cricket, cricket, cricket. And then you
mm,
suddenly get sort of that side curveball in respect
yeah.
of actually, I'm not enjoying this. I can't believe I'm not enjoying it. And that was obviously to do with the dad and the influence and all that sort of
Yes.
stuff. So you make that plunge and you think, okay, geez, this might, everything could be over very quickly here if I don't make it. And, oh, blah, blah, blah. And then that was the defining that actually there was a future, or there was, even if it was only,
Yeah.
that I still, I played that to a decent level. Okay, I didn't get a cap, but it was that was the sort of recognition for me that that was sort of on the right path,
Yeah.
and it was great. And also, when you're playing in places like South Africa and you win sort of the crowds out, and then you start getting your own headlines for your
Yes.
own accord, then
That's
mentally,
good
and
news.
yeah, it is good news, and that's what I suppose that's what sport's about.
It is indeed. And you quite rightly say you were called up to the senior England squad by Clive Woodward, of course,
Mm.
for the 2000 tour of South Africa. You played in tour matches against the Leopards, and I hope I pronounced this right, against Quickerland West, but sadly never won a senior international cap, which is a
Yeah.
shame because you probably had the quality to do so. And what do you remember about the South African tour? And of course, do you think about why you never won a senior
Well,
England international
I
cap?
think I think there would have been a look. I think there was a very strong possibility I'd have been picked for the
Hmm.
last on the bench for the last trip. I had done well in the two games. I
Yeah.
mean, you've also got to remember that was a seriously strong. You look back, and my son Jimbo is obviously Wales and stuff. Gives me a bit of grief. He said, "Oh, well, how many caps have you got, Dad?" And I said 18. I said, I don't get two things because look, Jimbo is an unbelievable athlete and he's a fantastic rugby player.
Mm.
But you only have to look at who was in that team
Well, just
at that
remember, England won the
stage.
World Cup in 2003 under Clive Woodward. So that
So
explains the strength of the squad, doesn't it?
yeah, and it was. So I can remember getting picked, getting told, and Clive ringing me
Mm.
and saying, look, and it was unbelievable. And John O was our captain. You had Lawrence, you had Dorse, you had
Oh,
obviously Johnny, you had Ben Cohen, you had Josh Lucy, you Perez Pezza,
mm.
Jason. You had Grucock, you had Steve Borthwick, who's obviously in coach
Oh,
now. So
yep.
it was an unbelievable, and I suppose the belief as well. I mean, we'd never been over there and won.
Mm.
So and Clive, to all his thing, it was going into a professional era, and Clive, whatever you say, what Clive did, I feel what he did to rugby was similar to what Gallagher did for the Ryder Cup, and said, right,
Mm.
if you want me to do this, I'm going to do it properly.
Correct.
We're going to get the rights, we're going to get the coaches, we're going to look at this, that, and the other. And as soon as we're in that setup, we were down to Lillyshaw quite a bit. We'd be having tests, and we'd do this, and there were nutritionalists, there was everything. So you felt very much part of a team. And I can remember, and I was also put on the social committee, which was great. So we were in charge
Mm.
of going and organising the trips. Social side for the team. Um, but it was the atmosphere, it was the intensity of the South Africans, because it didn't matter when you play those the midweek games that you call them were so intense because it was their World Cup. They were playing England. They were
Yes.
that and then at the weekends it would be the main match. And it was fantastic. They play hard. They're big guys. The Afrikaners are big, big
Oh,
guys,
huge.
strong boys. But we did well. I mean, we won all our midweek games comfortably. Obviously, we unfortunately lost the first test to a couple of dubious decisions, and then we won the second.
Mm.
And it was a fantastic tour, because then that was the belief, no, they'd gone there, and then obviously the boys went on to go to New Zealand and won before they won the World Cup, and I
Yes.
got a chance, spend time with all those guys.
Great guys too. Great
Yeah,
guys.
it was unbelievable spending that time. And I suppose one of the memories is, speaking to Jono and a couple of guys who didn't really know me much, and they'd heard obviously I was a very hard trainer and this, that, and the other, and they
Mm.
said they came up at the, and it was good, because at the end of it they came up and said, we thought you were a bit of a, bore, and you're going to be this, but actually, you know what, this team, it's been great fun, and it was great fun.
Incredible.
Yeah, it was great fun. It was a privilege for me to be on that tour.
Oh,
I
without
learned a
doubt.
lot. Yeah, and okay, I didn't get my cap. Yes, am I disappointed? 100%. Did I?
Yeah.
Could I got it? I thought, I think there was a strong possibility I'd have been picked on that last tour on the bench, but unfortunately, I got the stomach bug that seems to happen to a lot of teams when they're playing South Africa in a certain time.
Funny that. Yes.
Yeah,
But so that's probably one of the reasons why you didn't get your cap. You're just unwell, and that was that at that time,
yeah,
which is a
it
shame,
was.
isn't it?
Yeah,
Huge
it
shame.
was. I mean, I remember Brian Ashton coming up after the next game and said, "You deserve your opportunity." So I just think that, and a couple of things that Clive had said, I think that there was a strong possibility I'd have got my cap for the end of that,
Yeah.
if I wasn't sick.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Huge shame.
that's disappointing. But look, you know, I still went on the tour.
You did.
I loved
Great
it.
experience. Wonderful memories.
So yeah, and then I then got back and obviously spent time at Newcastle. Myself and Rob didn't see eye to eye, and yeah, and then there's another chapter.
Yeah, no, end of another chapter, and of course, then you did make one final move in rugby union to Leeds Tykes,
Yeah,
playing for one season before you switched to rugby league, moving to Leeds Rhinos. Interesting. So why the move from union to league? What was
but
the
it wasn't. What
decision
happened
there?
was, I'll be straight. I got lied to by, and I'm
Oh,
quite happy.
right.
I'm really quite happy to say
Oh,
this, because
absolutely. Be honest.
I got lied to, Rob. In my last season, I touched on it previously. I had I had what to it now. I had to have three major groin operations throughout my
Yeah.
career. And in the last season, Johnny was injured, Dave Walder was injured. They had a few injuries, and I was kicking, and we were down. And I kept saying to Rob, I said, Rob, I've got to get this operation done. I've lost,
Mm.
2 yards of pace. I've got no, I can't step. And he said, look, Liam, your contract's safe. You're fine. Need you. Can you just hang off, hang off, hang off? So I did that. No problem at all. I did that. Anyway, when it came to, I remember Adam Wheatley, who was my agent, went, and I was like, and he rang me and I said, so what have they offered me? And he said, you're not going to believe this. And I said, okay, what? They said, Rob hasn't, he's not going to offer you a contract. I said, pardon? So you can imagine the red mist I had. So I rang
Oh.
up, I just could not believe I'd been lied to in that respect, and
Mm.
it really affected me. But what I did then was, I needed the operation. I
Yeah.
spoke because we still had, it was just after Christmas, so it was a fair bit of time. So I rang Marty, who was a physio. I said, Marty, this is what's happened. Can you get me in? I'm not playing another game until I get my operation. I need
Mm.
to get fit. I need to, this is unbelievable that I've been treated like this.
Mm.
So I went in, this was my third groin operation. I wish they'd known it was my hips, because they could have gone in there and cleaned that up, and I wouldn't have lost the pace like that had. Anyway, had the groin operation. I just basically told Rob Andrew that I was going off to do my own rehab. I went to Spain, to my mum and dad, Desert Springs in Spain. I spent a month there, and I did everything myself. I was that cheesed off that how I'd been
Mm.
treated. I came back, and I came back. I can always remember the first training session we came back. It was chalk and cheese. I'd been struggling for nearly a year and a bit with these issues, but because I'd already had a previous Gilmore's groin, and then I
Yes.
had to have the second one because obviously the hips were stopping the mobility, so it was putting a lot of pressure on the groins, and I was ripping the groin areas. And you basically produces a hole, so they have to go in, put a gauze in, and do all this. But anyway, I came back and it was like, oh, what a breath. I felt strong. I felt nimble again. Still, and I came back and Rob wouldn't put me on, didn't
No.
want me to play. And, just to do that sort of thing when you're messing around with people's career
Yeah, it's terrible.
was the thing. So, and it was fear. So I sort of lost a little bit of interest in what was going on, and it was Jonathan Davis, Jiffy. Jiffy said, "Mate, if you look, you got two choices. You can either go down, or why don't you think about rugby league?" And we'd always watch rugby league. I always admired the skill level, the intensity, and the speed of rugby league. And he said, "Look, let me sing," and he organised for me to go down to the Bradford Bulls to Brian Noble, and I went down and did sort of a couple of months with them, and then I got a phone call from Gary Hetherington. Said, "Look, we want you to. We can see that we had played against Leeds, and I played in like an academy game, and I'd done really, really well. I think there was politics within Bradford, and I think Nobby would have signed me." But there were things in there, and obviously at that stage there was also um, players and wage caps and all this sort of stuff, which is quite technical in rugby league compared to union. Um, depending. So they weren't at that stage to do it. But what I did realise is how much I really enjoyed the game, and very
Mm.
quickly, I had whatever I play it or do, I've got a very good brain in respect of understanding what I need to do, whether it's be golf, whatever it is. Um, so, and then Gary Hetherington rang me up and said, "Liam, we'd like to sign you on a dual contract." I say, "Well, that's fine, Gary, because I think I've lost a little my ambition for rugby union, but I'm absolutely loving this league." And he said, "Great, we'll come. Let's have a look at it." So I came, signed for Tykes. I only played a few games, and then obviously went straight and played for the Rhinos, and again playing with people like Rob Burrow, Kevin Sinfield, Keith Senior, Ellis. There was some amazing Lower TT. It was great. And again, I think I've been very lucky in some of the clubs I played for.
Definitely.
Cardiff, all the clubs have been amazing support. And then, Leeds, especially, the Rhinos, it's unbelievable. They're so loyal, and amazing and get behind. And we had a unbelievable team there. And the coaching side, and I would say this now from anybody, if you were to have the opportunity, and I would make all kids learn the skills of what rugby league is in respect of tackling, the basic skills, tackling,
Mm.
passing, running angles. Because it was like going back to school for me under the likes of Tony Smith and the rugby league boys, because I learned actually properly how to do things, and
Mm.
it was amazing. And I think a lot of the union guys would learn so much. And then you've seen it, haven't you? You've seen in the past years how many influential people from rugby league have come into union to really
Yes.
strengthen coaching up to skills, attack. um, you know, and it was, and I had a fantastic time. I loved it.
That's brilliant. It's a real good story. And of course, it doesn't end there, does it? Because in 2004, you played for London Broncos on loan, and in 2005 signed for Wigan Warriors, feeling that you could not get a regular place in the Rhinos team. However, in your 3 seasons in rugby league, usually as a second row, you played 28, I believe 28 senior games. You'll probably correct me in a minute,
Mm.
Liv,
No,
scoring 7 tries and 6 goals. I mean, are there any other notable moments, Liam, in your time in league? Because you seem to enjoy that. That was a
I loved it.
yes,
I think the London Broncos. So look, it is a different game.
it is.
So when I came, and we had such a strong team at Leeds, so Tony Smith, and they said, "Look, would you go down on loan to Leeds?"
Mm,
Sorry, to London Broncos. Get you be regular playing first team, all this sort of stuff, and I absolutely jumped at it because I was wanting to learn the game properly.
yes.
And I went down there. Um, and I loved it. It was great down there. And the one game we had, we played against Leeds, and it was down there. And we should have beaten Leeds. You know, we drew with them, and I had a kick from the touchline to draw the level, which I nailed. And we dropped the ball. Should have gone through. I can't remember the name. One of the guys dropped the ball, and he was right through, and we would have won the game. And
Oh,
I think then, you know, Tony came up to me at the end of the game and said, "Right, I think it's, you know, you're ready to come home." And I said, "I'm glad that, because I was obviously, the family were based up north. I was spending you know, most of the time down in London, and you know, I wanted to get back. Although I had a fantastic time and learnt a lot down at the
yeah,
Broncos, it was then time to me go back up to Leeds, and I loved that period of time. It was such a great team. You know, I also remember a fantastic game we played against the Bradford Bulls at Oddstall. And you know, with
mhm,
games where you're just on it, and I suppose you just go into a, you know, everybody says it's your zone. And there are a number of games where I can remember that I was in a zone, whether it be the cricket, whether it be that, or whatever it is. And that was another thing where you look at your stats, and your stats, that game against Odsall, that game against Leeds, and a few others in the league were games that, you know, I just knew I was on, I suppose, on fire in respect, in
mhm,
a way, but on had a great game. But you know, that game against Oddstall, making the break, coming through, and then passing it to Robin for the to score inside, and that was no mean feat. You know, that Kevin Sinford, you know, I was off laying balls. It was
indeed.
great. And I suppose, look, and I get it. That was such a strong team at Leeds. I wanted to play. You know, I had Lawatiti, I had some Ellis, so there was some great players in the position and youngsters, and rugby league's always going to be a young game, and I could understand why
Definitely.
they had some youngsters coming through. And we played against Wigan probably a month earlier. I scored a try, hit a great line, scored a try against Wigan, at Wigan, and then I got a phone call saying, "Look, do you want to come to Wigan? You know, we really like you. You hit some great lines." So I did, because, you know, I just wanted to play. And how long I didn't know how long I had left, because, you know, although I was only 28 or so, I knew the hips were really coming. I was sore again.
Mm,
And I had a couple of issues with my neck, getting, you know, stingers, what we call now stingers.
yes.
Um, but even so, you know, even that time at Wigan, and Wigan weren't the strongest of what they were. Um, but they're just great, very much. The rugby league boys, there's a camaraderie, and also, I suppose, I don't know what the word I'm looking for here, a grounding that
Mhm,
is just very, very loyal to each other. Because you know, and I really enjoyed that, both from that, and you know, yeah, moved around a little bit, but it was great, and I loved it. It's such a great game,
mm.
and I just, you know, hope it goes. And you know, if there's one game I'd always switch on, that's the NRL, in Australia, because I think that is probably the toughest, most spectacle sport that there is at the moment.
Interesting. I mean, sadly as well, you know, after you did retire from rugby in 2005, and of course, not your hips, it was due to your neck injury,
Yeah,
as you just briefly mentioned, Liam. I mean, there were signs that you might return to playing
yeah,
competitive cricket. So in 2006, you played in an England 11 victory against
yeah,
Lancashire in a testimonial match for Andrew Flintoff, what a player he was, at Old Trafford. I mean, that's interesting. So tell us more, because you didn't actually
yeah.
return to cricket after that, did you? You could have done, potentially.
No, it was, yeah, it was an interesting period. So I was playing. I can remember why I had to retire. I mean, I was having these neck injuries, and I had a
Mm.
slight thinning of the spinal cord at C3, 5 and 6,
Wow.
and we're playing. Wigan were playing Saints. We were playing Saints, and I'd made a breakthrough, and I was going on. Or anyway, I went down. I went down, and then Kieran Cunningham came in with a knee right into the back of the neck,
Oh,
um, and I couldn't move, and it was really, really strange and weird. I mean, you're lying there and you can't move, and okay, it was only for about a minute that I couldn't move, but that scared the shit out of me. Excuse me for
Yeah, that's
swearing.
scary. That's scary.
It really scared it. And remember the physio coming on saying, "You're right." He said, and I looked at him. I was on my side. I said, "I can't move." And then he obviously realised, and he could see the fear in my face.
Mm.
And then he came on and didn't want to move me. And then I could suddenly just started to feeling that some pins and needles came back through into my hands, and then I could move my fingers, and then basically the feeling came back. But for a minute I was paralyzed, and it was the
Yeah,
scariest thing in my life.
oh,
And so I went to see the I went for all the MRI scans, went to have a look, and then went to see the specialist, and he said, "Look, Liam, there is a significant thinning around the spinal cord because you've had obviously a lot of knocks in your career and all this."
mm.
And I said, "Okay, give it me in layman terms." He said, "Look, of course you can try and carry on, but there is also now the possibility that you could get serious injury or you could do damage to yourself going on." And that was it. That was just
Yeah, that's all you. That's enough, isn't it?
I want my whole life is outdoors. I'm passionate. My son's playing or whatever it is,
Yeah,
and that was it. And so I sort of took 6 months off because obviously to let everything settle down. I mean, I had the pins and needles, and it took nearly 6 months for everything to settle down after. Anyway, um, and then very kindly, Hampshire gave me a testimonial game, which because I'd been playing a bit of club cricket and stuff during the summer
yes.
when it wasn't. I played for Middlesbrough, played for Northallerton, played this, so I was keeping my cricket going, and because she got hand eye and I was,
Mm.
I suppose, talented in it. Anyway, we had an unbelievable Hampshire 11 versus sort of a rest of the world 11, my 11. At the Rose, and I'm in Hamburg as we sit, but back at home at the office, I've still got the bat there in the corner just to sometimes reflect and realize,
Yes.
And so Dad was an umpire, Freddie played. Sorry, Freddie wasn't playing because he was injured, but he came and umpired because he was injured at that time. But KP, Judgy, Warney, Flower Brothers,
Incredible.
Wazim, Waka Yunis. I mean, the
Yeah.
players that we had in this game was unbelievable. We did the Rose Bowl, and it was fantastic. And Freddie said, "Look, would you come and play in a team against Lancashire?" I said, "Only if you want, Freddie." And he said, "Yeah, I do actually. I'd love you to come and play." And I said, "Well, thanks very much. I'd love that because I did all
Yeah.
right in that game, hit a few runs, and it was like, okay, I can still do this."
Yeah, of
And
course you can.
for not playing competitive cricket for nearly 8 years or so, although I played bit of club cricket, and
Mm.
then played in this, and it was funny because it was a testimonial game for Freddie, and. And it was funny because his manager then wasn't so keen, thinking, "Well, why have we not got an England cricketer playing, and why is Liam playing?" So Freddie actually, fair play to Freddie. Freddie said, "No, you're playing in it," and I did, and I came on and did really well. I smashed it
Brilliant.
around, and then suddenly the press picked up on it and said, "Is this the possibility of Liam coming back in?" And I don't think, and then suddenly I thought, "Oh God, do no, absolutely not." I was still 28, 29 or whatever I was.
Yeah, you're still young. It must be very
Yeah,
tempting.
yeah, it was tempting. And so I thought, you know what? But I didn't. I think it was at a stage for me as well. I was going through a different play. I
Mm.
think it was either just about to happen or I'd gone through my first marriage
Mm.
to Sarah Jane. Wasn't the most acrimonious. I'd never sort of, I suppose, I signed at 15. I was very committed to everything I did, so I hadn't had any sort of break or chance to get away and do something that I needed to do. You know,
Mm.
so I thought, I can't. I've got to go and try and do something else now. There's a new chapter ahead of me. Um,
Yes.
so I didn't want the feeling of ever to think, oh my God, am I going to now be the son of again? And I think I did think about it because I had, there was talk of it. There was a couple of people came to me within the
Indeed.
county circuit and said, "Do you fancy it?" And I actually turned it down.
Any
Just didn't want to
regrets
do it.
now, Liam? Do you
No,
often think
no,
that?
no.
No, you
I have no regrets.
okay? That's good then, isn't it, really?
Yeah, no, there's no regrets there because um, I gave that up in the first instance, and I think, but what I did do, I went to play club cricket and really enjoyed that. And yeah, and then
Spot on.
tried to get in the real wide world and learn about a few things.
Yeah, which we all have to do. And since retiring from active sport, as you've done that quite a large part of your life, you have been running a sports travel company. I'm not sure that's still the case. I mean, how
No.
is the business going? You've obviously moved on from that now.
Yeah, no. So look, I think we all make, lots. It's been a very interesting transition period for me. I've made a lot of
Mm.
mistakes. I think you go from, and I think
Well,
people
we
don't
learn from
understand
those.
this. Yeah. And I think a lot of people, especially sports, people don't realize how reliant you are, or not reliant, but the community, how you trust people, how you do everything in
Yes.
space. I think it's a lot. I know doing some stuff with a couple of military-based businesses as well, and it's very
Mm.
interesting how much you know. Camaraderie, but also synergy is for the sports world and the military world of when they come out of that environment, how to find themselves, how to find the right
Yeah.
job, how to do all this. And I struggled massively because I trusted everybody. I made some serious mistakes. And thankfully, I think now I'm here in Hamburg now. My passion is the golf. We're here for the golf show in Hamburg. We just come back from the PGA. We've got an unbelievable product in a solar buggy. So we're the only sustainable solar buggy in the world at the moment. So
Mm.
we've taken on the likes of Yamaha, Easy Go, and Club Car. The
Sounds
response
interesting.
we've had, and the team around, we've got Guy John, who 2009 started Foresight Golf. He sold that for a lot of money a year ago, and he's involved with this, and there's a fantastic team, and I'm really excited about this because I found something that, my golf is my passion now. I've got a 10-year-old
Yeah.
and an 8-year-old who are very good. It's going to give me the opportunity to travel around with this company, giving them a bit of golf, me playing golf, which I love.
Mm.
So I think for the
Sounds like
first
the
time,
perfect life.
it is, yeah. And I tell you what, but as I said, Lord Russell, I've made mistakes, and I've
Yeah,
you
we
learn.
all
But I
have.
tell you what, you do also is when you go through those tough times, you find out who your true friends are.
You do.
Um, and I've been through that. I think now that I've got great light at the end of the tunnel, I'm very excited about it. And it almost feels how I feel now is how I felt when the realization of that rugby, when I changed that, made that decision, you got that selection and for the Sanzatard tournament. you
Yeah,
know, I'm really excited about what we're doing. And that's what I'm
fantastic.
doing now.
Well, what a great life story, and you've got a whole life ahead of you in business now, by the sounds of it. So that's really really good to hear. Fantastic news, and so I wish you all the best with that. That's an
Thank you.
incredible business by the sounds of it. And of course, you're doing what you're passionate about: golf, traveling around the world, playing golf, doing what you're doing. I mean, that's just a magical lifestyle you've developed there. So fantastic news to hear. But you know what? We've stepped over the 60 minutes. Can you believe it? Unbelievable how time just flies when you're enjoying yourself. So I'll do what I always do here, Liam. As always, on the World of Lord Russell podcast talk show, we could talk forever, Liam, and I'm sure
Yeah.
we could because there's so much more to talk about your life as a cricketer, rugby union, and rugby league player. It's been a huge pleasure as always, and as always, the pleasure is all mine. And of course, the show's audience when this podcast is released on the World of Lord Russell podcast talk show and the Elite Arena Business and Sport talk show on YouTube. So thank you, Liam. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll give you Liam Botham and I'll give a round of applause here. That's a fantastic story. That really was. Your lifestyle is something else. It's brilliant.
No, it's been a
The
real
next,
pleasure. I've loved every minute of it. Brought
oh,
a lot back of
super.
memories, and sorry, there's a few things that probably haven't remembered. I'm not one of those people who look back, but it's jogged a lot of memories. And thank you for having me and giving me the honour to be on your show.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. Do you mind hanging on whilst I just finish up?
Absolutely, mate.
Good to chat with you afterwards for briefly as well. The next episode on the World of Lord Russell podcast talk show is Super Bob. where my special guest will be Robert Taylor, who's a very good friend of mine, actually. Fantastic to have him on, who is an English former professional footballer, licensed football agent and manager. As a player, he was a forward and was active as a professional between 1990 and 2003. Although featuring for Wolverhampton Wanderers and Manchester City, he notably had lengthy and prolific spells with Leyton Orient, Brentford and Gillingham. Rob Taylor notably scored for the Gills at Wembley Stadium in the 1999 Division 2 playoff final against Manchester City, only months before he would join the Blues. What a story this is. So a great show to look forward to for all football fanatics alike. And of course, exclusive on the World of Lord Russell podcast talk show and the Elite Arena business and sports talk show on YouTube. And of course, I'm looking forward to seeing you all on the inside. So until then, it's au revoir from him and au revoir from me.